Because I've been a little selfish. I haven't given any of it to you. I wanted to keep it for myself to the last. Keep what? When I was just a boy, younger than you, it began to come to me. But it wasn't the seeing beyond for me. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond. Jonas frowned, trying to figure that out. What did you hear? He asked. Music, the giver said, smiling. I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it is called music. I'll give you some before I go. Jonas shook his head emphatically. No, giver, he said. I want you to keep that to have with you when I'm gone. So pause for a minute and write down. Jonas is so upset by what he saw when his father released the newborn twin that he cannot bear to go to his home. Period. So Jonas is so upset by what he saw about the release of that little twin that he couldn't bear to go home and confront his father, I'm sure. So now write this. He stays with the giver that night. Period. He stays with the giver that night. Period. They come up with a plan. They come up with a plan. Period. Jonas is going to leave the community, comma, and when he does, comma, all of the memories that he has gained for the last year will go back to the people. All of those memories that he's gained for the last year will go back to the people. And the giver will stay to help them deal with those memories. And the giver will stay to help them with those memories. And then finally put down, the giver tells Jonas that he did not see beyond. He could hear beyond. He could hear music. What an amazing thing that would be, because in this world there is no music. Kind of sad. Remember, you can pause this and start it back up whenever you need to. So we're continuing. Jonas went home the next morning, cheerfully greeted his parents, and lied easily about what a busy, pleasant night he had had. His father smiled and lied easily too about his busy and pleasant day the day before. Throughout the school day, as he did his lessons, Jonas went over the plan in his head. It seemed startlingly simple. Jonas and the giver had gone over it and over it late into the night hours. For the next 2 weeks, as the time for the December ceremony approached, the giver would transfer every memory of courage and strength that he could to Jonas. He would need those to help him find the elsewhere that they both were sure existed. They knew it would be a very difficult journey. Then, in the middle of the night, before the ceremony, Jonas would secretly leave his dwelling. This was probably the most dangerous part because it was a violation of a major rule for any citizen not on official business to leave a dwelling at night. "I'll leave at midnight," Jonas said. "The food collectors will be busy, or finished rather, picking up the evening meal remains by then, and the path maintenance crews don't start their work that early. So there won't be anyone to see me, unless of course someone is out on emergency business." "I don't know what you should do if you're seen, Jonas," the giver had said. "I have memories, of course, of all kinds of escapes, people fleeing from terrible things throughout history, but every situation is individual. There's no memory of one like this." "I'll be careful," Jonas said. "No one will see me." As receiver in training, you're held in very high respect already, so I think you wouldn't be questioned very forcefully. I'd just say it was on some important errand for the receiver. I'd say it was all your fault that I was out after hours," Jonas teased. They both laughed a little nervously, but Jonas was certain that he could slip away unseen from his house, carrying an extra set of clothing. Silently, he would take his bicycle to the riverbank and leave it there, hidden in bushes, with the clothing folded beside it. Then he would make his way through the darkness on foot, silently to the annex. "There's no nighttime attendant," the giver explained. "I'll leave the door unlocked. You simply slip into the room, and I'll be waiting for you." His parents would discover when they woke that he was gone. They would also find a cheerful note from Jonas on his bed, telling them that he was going for an early morning ride along the river, and that he'd be back for the ceremony. His parents would be irritated, but not alarmed. They would think him inconsiderate, and they would plan to chastise him later. They would wait with mounting anger for him. Finally, they'd be forced to go, taking Lily to the ceremony without him. "They won't say anything to anyone, though," Jonas said quite certainly. They won't call attention to my rudeness because it would reflect on their parenting. And anyway, everyone is so involved in the ceremony that they probably won't notice that I'm not there. Now that I'm a 12 and in training, I don't have to sit with my age group anymore, so Asher will think I'm with my parents or with you. And your parents will assume you're with Asher or with me." Jonas shrugged. "It will take everyone a while to realize that I'm not there at all. So, okay, here's the plan. Please put it down. First, over the next 2 weeks, the giver will transfer all of his memories of strength and courage to Jonas. Give him all these memories. And then, on the day of this ceremony, Jonas will write a note to his parents saying that he's going for a ride by the river. Then he'll leave some clothing folded up by his bike by the river. His parents won't be able to wait for him to return, and they'll go to the ceremony, and no one will notice that he has left, because they'll all assume that he's with someone else. Of course, you can pause this to kind of catch up if you need to with your notes. Jonas shrugged. It will take everyone a while to realize that I'm not there at all, and you and I will be long on our way by then. In the early morning, the giver would order a vehicle and driver from the speaker. He visited the other communities frequently, meeting with their elders. His responsibilities extended over all the surrounding areas, so this would not be an unusual undertaking. Okay, so add that. In the morning, The giver will order a car, and Jonas and the giver will get in the car and leave the community. Ordinarily, the giver did not attend the December ceremony. Last year, he had been present because of the occasion of Jonas's selection, in which he was so involved. But his life was usually quite separate from that of the community. No one would comment on his absence or on the fact that he had chosen this day to be away. When the driver and vehicle arrived, the giver would send the driver on some errand, and during his absence, the giver would help Jonas hide in the storage area of the vehicle. I guess we call that a trunk. He would have with him a bundle of food which the giver would save from his own meals during the next 2 weeks. So that's important. Put down, the giver will save food for Jonas over the next 2 weeks. The ceremony would begin with all the community there, but by then Jonas and the giver would be on their way. By midday, Jonas's absence would become apparent and would be a cause for serious concern. The ceremony would not be disrupted. Such a disruption would be unthinkable, but searchers would be sent out into the community. By the time his bicycle and clothing were found, the giver would be returning. Jonas by then would be on his own way, making his journey elsewhere. The giver on his return would find the community in a state of confusion and panic, confronted by a situation which they had never faced before, and having no memories from which to find either solace or wisdom, they would not know what to do and would seek his advice. He would go to the auditorium where the people would be gathered still. He would stride to the stage and command their attention. He would make the solemn announcement that Jonas had been lost in the river. He would immediately begin the ceremony of loss. Jonas, Jonas, they would say loudly, as they had once said the name of Caleb. The giver would lead the chant. Together, they would let Jonas's presence in their lives fade away as they said his name in unison, more slowly, softer and softer, until he was disappearing from them, until he was no more than an occasional murmur, and then by the end of the day, by the end of the long day, gone forever, not to be mentioned again. Their attention would turn to the overwhelming task of bearing the memories themselves. The giver would help them. Yes, I understand that they'll need you, Jonas had said at the end of the lengthy discussion and planning. But I'll need you too. Please come with me. He knew the answer even as he made the final plea. My work will be finished, the giver had replied gently, when I've helped the community to change and become whole. I'm grateful to you, Jonas, because without you, I would never have figured out a way to bring about the change. But your role now is to escape, and my role is to stay. But don't you want to be with me, giver? Jonas asked sadly. The giver hugged him. I love you, Jonas, he said, but I have another place to go. When my work here is finished, I want to be with my daughter. Jonas had been staring glumly at the floor. Now he looked up, startled. I didn't know you had a daughter, giver. You told me that you'd had a spouse, but I never knew about your daughter. The giver smiled and nodded. For the first time in their long months together, Jonas saw him look truly happy. Her name was Rosemary, the giver said. Put that in your notes, that after the giver helps the community deal with all of these memories, he wants to go and be with his daughter. And his daughter was Rosemary. As you may recall, she was the receiver 10 years ago. Rosemary. She was supposed to become the new receiver, but the memories that he shared were so painful that she could not bear them, and she asked to be released. So, we conclude chapter 20. Please make sure that you have your notes neatly written and that you take a picture of them and that you send them to me at c.barberc@pcsb.org and that you turn them into Google Classroom. I hope you have a wonderful day and take care.